We have Captain John Galvin with us today.
We viewed everything as we're in the business of making smiles.
Every week was like bucktails, plugs, eels.
I probably finished a summer in the red. Probably more often than not.
He brought that
I think
up.
there was a track just cut on iTunes.
He's world renowned as the Skilly Man.
I think Sly Stallone could play him on film.
I think that would be perfect.
I'm a little younger, but in worse shape. Welcome to another episode of the On the Water Podcast. Beautiful.
Let's go! What's up, everybody? We're back with a new episode of the On the Water Podcast. We have Captain John Galvin with us today.
Thanks for having me.
And the esteemed Jimmy Fee.
Not quite esteemed, but man, it is the end of December when we're recording this right now. Tuna season for us feels a long way away. And man, for you, you're going to be offshore fishing, what, about 10 days again?
Yeah, sometime within that timeline. We don't really, summer never ends for our program. It really just kind of changes locations.
So you're the captain of El Diablo.
Correct.
But back us up. Start us. How did you get to that point? You're Falmouth. You grew up in Falmouth?
I grew up summering here in Woods Hole, where my mother was born and raised. And as a teenager, started running around the docks and ended up behind the counters at Eastman's, working for Jimmy Young and the late Chuck Eastman. From there, charter boats, head boats in college in Rhode Island. Then moved to Florida, came back every summer, mating on private boats, spent a couple years on the deck of Castafari for Damon. Moved up to a boat called Mulberry Canyon, which is a private boat, and then we turned it into a charter operation for quite a few years. I know we hosted you guys with the TV show quite a few years ago now. I think it's over 10 years ago. And from there, it just kind of, there's a lot of different boats in between as I was going to different locations. And then ended up on a program called Haruko, which was there for a few years with my buddy Tyler Andrason. A stint on a boat called Blondie out of New York, and then El Diablo the last 5 years now, 5.5 years.
Now, is this something you always knew you wanted to do? Did you want to make fishing your full-time job?
Oh yeah. I remember I was probably maybe 13 or so, 14. Thinking of Marlin magazine, could have been a saltwater sportsman. Ad was probably a Viking ad, and saw a guy driving that boat and pointed to him, told my parents, I want to do that. And then being here, the Falmouth Grand Prix was going on. You had the Nantucket Billfish tournament. And you'd see the guys driving the sport fish boats. They just looked like, they're rock stars on the water. It's like, who doesn't want to be a rock star?
Dude, so I used to work at a tackle shop summers in college, and we had the mates and the captains who would just kind of follow the sun, chase the bite all year. And I'm like, that is what I want to do. But I never made that leap. Like, you have to, you got to jump into it, Like,
it's total leap of faith.
That first job you probably took. Like, what was the first one you took when you were like, okay, this is what I'm doing, but I don't know if it's going to work out?
The summers, I was always here in the summer during college. So I started to spend some time, not just in the charter boats, but getting some time on some private boats. And then I ended up going to Florida to work with my buddy, the late Kevin Glenn, founder of Poon Harpoons. And, he had a yacht management business at the time. He had been running boats, and he had gotten away from it for a bit for his tackle business. And got some experience with some different boats down in Florida. Did a couple Bahamas trips. With one winter I spent in Mexico and Isla Mujeres on a boat. And it kind of, every stop along the way just expanded the network as well as experience, and just kind of, it snowballs from there. But there were years where, I was questioning myself, like, do I just go follow the father's footsteps, in the legal world, or do I go sell insurance? Do I, get a job at Enterprise Rent-A-Car? It was just, there were a lot of times where I was questioning a lot of stuff. It was like, I'm a really stubborn person, and it's like, I'm just gonna keep pushing through. You got to get like the 10,000 hour rule. You get your 10,000 hours, and then things should hopefully, if they line up for you, start to,
fall into place.
yeah.
It's gotta feel like a pretty serious grind, like in the early years when you're, accumulating the network, getting your time in, and figuring out like when's it gonna break open for me.
Yeah, you have opportunities that you think are going to come to fruition, and then for one reason or another, they don't. That's like, a setback or detour. I look at it more as a detour because it's, it's directing you into a different path. But it's, it can be disheartening at the moment, but just got to forget about it and keep punching through again, just being stubborn.
Yeah.
And maybe not wanting to grow up and get a normal job.
Yeah, it's all of us here too in this building,
It's kind of nice traveling and fishing, and the fishing's the glory part of it. There's 90% of it's maintaining these incredible vessels, which is equally as fun and can be frustrating as fishing.
Yeah.
But I'm very fortunate. Nearly 20 years now, doing it, and it's afforded me some pretty amazing experiences, places, people, fish. It's awesome. We're just gonna, keep the party going as long as I can. As Julian Edelman said, till the wheels fall off, right? or the props fall off.
Yeah, exactly. What? How old were you when you got your ticket?
I was 20.
20
in college.
And then, like, how long after that did your first, captain job come around?
Probably Mulberry Canyon. So that was probably 26, 27. Somewhere around there. I had some guys that I worked under that gave me some opportunities to, learn some of the larger boats, handling them. And then a couple side clients, boat owners that were willing to put some faith in a young kid and go through some growing pains, specifically the gentleman who owned Mulberry Canyon. That little red boat was a great platform to
iconic red boat
to learn from and go through the paces of mistakes. It was big enough to where I couldn't really do too much damage, but small enough to hide my mistakes. It was good.
What were some of the early mistakes? When you say mistakes, what do you mean?
Weather. It's a lot of humbling with weather, making decisions, especially when you're charter fishing and taking people out. Keeping things running, trying to, still fish as hard as you can, but also keep the boat to a certain level for safety. Obviously, certain situations, some areas, docking and, overcompensating, learning to not be a cowboy and that slow is pro. Only go as fast as you're willing to hit something.
Yeah.
That's good
advice.
Pilings are there for a reason, use them, but don't abuse them.
So tell us about the vessel you're running right now, El Diablo.
She's a 2023 model, 72-foot Viking. We had a 68 prior that I inherited when I took over the program. So the 72's, she's very purpose-built for what we do. It's an awesome platform. Smallest Viking, biggest motors. So she's a very fast boat, very comfortable boat. Just designed specifically, between the Viking Yacht Company, the individuals I work for, and myself, specifically for how our program is between up here in the summertime and down south in the winter.
So that's like a three-tiered collaboration between builder, owner, and captain, correct?
Correct. The ownership and myself, we're putting our, we put our 2 cents in terms of, interior decor, exterior aesthetics, mechanicals, electronics, and all the different, appointments that any one boat would want, as well as, layout, configurations of certain staterooms, salon. And Viking being a, semi-custom, semi-production, however you want to look at it. They have, their engineers will do their best to accommodate whatever your thoughts and ideas are. And then, so it's definitely a collaborative effort of, give and take. Some stuff in paper and in your mind you think is going to be great, and then when you start speaking with engineers about it, you're like, oh yeah, that's probably not going to work.
Yeah.
I feel like if I was ever given the keys to do that, you ever see it's an old Simpsons episode where like Homer's like Homer's brother owns a car company. He says, design the car. And Homer's like, I want a horn here, here, here. Anyhow, it's...
So you're going to have a sport fish with
It's a 30-year-old
shitload of
Simpsons
horns?
reference, so maybe nobody gets it. But anyhow, that's how I would be.
You can very quickly, I mean, the best way I describe for building a boat to anybody is, don't look at it as an options list. Look at it as an exemptions list. Pick everything. And then start working stuff off, because it's also like a haircut. It's easier to take off than it is to put on, and it's a lot cheaper to take off than add on.
How different does a boat with somebody with your experience and your specific set of needs come out from something that just rolls off the factory, rolls out of the factory?
I mean, if someone hypothetically just went to Viking and said, I want a Viking 64. Mm-hmm. With a tower, you give them a couple basics of what you want. They're so well adept at building boats. I mean, they've built over 5,000 boats. Yeah. They're gonna probably put, they have a, renowned demo program that's got several boats a year that they're going through. So they know good systems that are gonna work. So you could easily, you could get one right off the lot, per se, if you wanted. Same with, their Valhalla Boatworks company. Same thing. You just gotta tell them what you want for upholstery and paint, and then if you do have an electronics preference, but they have everything pretty well dialed in.
It's wild to see those boats running through the backwaters in New Jersey where they demo those things, and it almost looks like something out of the Charleston, the Carolinas or something.
That's a beautiful area.
Huge sporty going through what looks like a river system, a backwater river system. I wouldn't even want to be that captain. Never mind having to do everything else that captains do and making the calls on the weather and making sure the boat's ready to rock.
Yeah, you're running a large vessel in an estuary.
Yeah,
pretty
exactly.
much, and their factory caps are pretty well dialed into that area.
Yeah.
But it is something else to go up and down the river, and in areas where you probably should be in a flats boat or a john boat catching flounders or stripers, and you aren't going to be in a 90-foot sport fish.
Crazy. How about your early, passion for fishing? Where did that come from? How did that start?
What's all in the summer?
Yeah.
My mother taught me how to cast a little push button rod. Probably had a cast balloon silver Castmaster on it in Neal Pond, where she grew up. Caught some snapper blues, and I think at that point it was
game over.
It was over.
Yeah.
And then it just became a definitely passion, bordering on obsession. And it just grew from there. And the tackle shop didn't help. Every kid that works in a tackle shop, you get your employee discount, so there was no paycheck coming out.
Sure.
Because it was all going right back to the
Every
Eastmans.
week,
Every week, right back to Eastman's.
You worked at a shop, right, Jim?
I did. I never, if I didn't have a free place to stay in the summer down in Ocean City, I wouldn't be able to do it.
Yeah.
Every week was like bucktails, plugs, eels. God, I spent most of my money on eels. It felt like in May and June.
You do an inventory, brand new product comes in. Ooh, we'll put those aside. I'll buy that. Yep. Paycheck in a couple days. Sometimes I probably finished a summer in the red. Probably more often than not.
That sounds like that's how my tackle shop employment would go if I had ever worked at one. I hadn't. But what kind of fish? We'll get into the fishing that you're known for, that you've done your whole life professionally. But on the rec side of things, when you just want to go bend a rod, what type of fishing trips do you get excited to go and do when it's just for fun?
I still love all of it, but flounder. I love flounder fishing.
Winter or summer?
Summer flounder. Winter too. They're fun, but I like fluke. I still love going fishing down the islands for stripers, big stripers. Lots of time and stuff I haven't caught yet. I do like a lot of fly fishing for bonefish. I like doing a lot of flats fishing, sight fishing, anything that's kind of got a spot and stock type feel to it.
What was the last new species you checked off?
Ooh. That's a good question.
I love checking off new species. I had to ask. You can come back to it.
I'm trying to think of something that really jumps out at me. I don't know. That's a really good question. I'd like to get a permit. I haven't caught a permit yet.
Haven't either. I really want one too.
I lost one to a shark on a wreck, and I was pretty bummed. But like, it's not a. I know the ultimate permit experience is on the flats, on the fly, but I would just like to catch one.
I'd like to do them both.
Yeah.
And like a lot of fish that go inshore, offshore, they behave so differently.
Yeah.
I think even their like fighting tendencies will behave differently. And if you see false albacore, for example, up here, hard charging inshore game fish, definitely like an economy engine.
Yeah.
For our coastal communities.
And offshore.
And then off South Florida, they're kind of a pest or bait.
Yeah.
In South Florida, it's like don't leave your lure dangling over the side of the boat because one's going to come grab it.
They feed differently too. They look different. To ours, I think it has to do with the watercolor. They're bright green, very silvery. They definitely have more of a bluer hue when we catch them off Miami. But even watching them come up on the baits when we're kite fishing, they behave a little differently. I mean, they still fight hard because they're a small little tuna, but I don't know. They definitely, as fish migrate like from one location to another, whether it's inshore or offshore in their specific region or truly changing latitudes, I like catching them in different areas, seeing how they behave differently.
So they'll harass your sailfish kite baits?
Oh, yeah.
That's got to be maddening. That must...
Sword bait.
Yeah, okay.
Sometimes if we're not... A lot of times we're into just bending rods. Even though when we had Mulberry Canyon, Mikey Hawks was our longtime mate and still fishes with us on El Diablo. We viewed everything as we're in the business of making smiles. And even with the private operation, it's the same thing. We might have there might be some guests on board. It might be one of only 1 or 2 times they're with us all year. So our goal is we got to bend rods. And if a school of albies, and I'll drive you nuts, bonitas, come piling through, sometimes, it's actions. Many times, a lot of people have never caught a little tuna before. So it's still action. It's still fun. Yeah. We're only fishing, 16-pound, 20-pound gear anyways. So it's not all that bad.
So through the winter, El Diablo is situated in Miami, right? Mm-hmm. And then up here, is it Nantucket?
Yeah.
You couldn't be in a better place, I think. I mean, you've got a beautiful boat, and then, too, you've got that access to the giant tuna, the canyons, some of the far eastern canyons that would be out of range, or a tougher run from, further west. So that's, I mean...
It's very strategic location to be out of. You can run up to the north. It's very easy to get out and run along the beach if we want to go up to Peaked Hill or Stellwagen. It's no different than a canyon run for us. Chatham, east of the island, all the rips on the front side, east side. The vineyard's only 18 miles away, so we can rip across to the vineyard if we want to fish. We can, go west-southwest, go fish off Rhode Island, go fish the dump, fish the canyons, fish the shoals. There's really nothing that's truly out of reach.
I mean, that's the ultimate spot, I think, for an offshore boat in New England.
True. We keep our tender there, too, and, we do a lot of inshore fishing all summer long around the island. It's just a spectacular place, rich with history, beauty, and just killer fishing. If the weather's not good for offshore, we only got a couple hours. The rips always got, albies, bones, bass, blues. The fluke fishing's world renowned.
Yeah.
The sea bassin is great. You can always find something, and because it's an island, there's always a lee side.
Very true.
That's the beauty of it as well.
Yeah.
So jumping ahead to this year, how would you rank the offshore specifically the canyon fishing this year? How was it overall?
I was killer basically out in Canadian waters.
Yeah. Really?
We were running 175 miles each way.
Wow.
Yeah, we were up Munson Canyon, that area. Powell. It was a piece of water that was just sat out there, and those of us who were able to get out there and had the abilities to, it was pretty spectacular fishing.
Yellowfin and big eye, or?
Oh yeah, all you wanted, yellowfin and big eye. A couple times there were some really big pockets of white marlin. A couple buddies put up some pretty big numbers, 20, 30 in the trip. Some awesome blue marlin. We got one in particular that was a really beautiful fish, probably 650 or so. Guys did well sword fishing too. The quality of the yellowfin and big eye were great. There's just no crowds.
175 miles is going to thin the herd quite a bit, I think. So.
It was definitely it was a luxury to be able to do so. But overall, I think it was a great offshore year. And the thing with offshore here is every year is different. The last couple of years, you had water that stayed more to the west, nothing really materialized way east, which is great because it becomes accessible for a lot of people. But with accessibility comes crowds and therefore pressure, which even when you are offshore, pressure does affect the fish, even in the canyons.
Yeah, we see it on the inshore grounds with the tuna where if you're not, you got your little bite at first light, and then as soon as there's all the radars, the sonar's pinging, everybody's dropping jigs, you'll mark them all day, but they won't eat.
Gets tougher.
Gets tough on the artificials, but and I imagine, like you said, same in the canyons too when it gets real bad.
A lot of it's there's always a first light bite, last light bite, especially when you're dealing with fish that are species that are predominantly, say, diurnal or nocturnal. But pressure plays a big role. On top of other like natural phenomena like moon sets, moon rises, your majors and minors can dictate whether it's not just tide, it's also what the moon's doing on the daytime. But I think it was a good canyon because then that late edge also kept sliding west and just stayed on the 100 fathom curve. So a lot of guys that kept their boats in the water in the fall were able to experience some pretty killer fishing out at the edge right through the fall.
We kept hearing that because we were doing reports weekly, and we're like, as soon as that moves west, it's going to be incredible. As soon as it moves west, it took a while, but it did.
Yeah, and it broke up at one point. And it looked like it was disintegrating, and then it regrouped and came right back with another big edge, and it was holding just a lot of biomass. So,
without having the network that's always kind of going and dipping their toes in the water, we're talking about 175 mile one way trip. Like, what is it? Is it just all the conditions where it's like, all right, it's right to go give it a look now?
Yeah, sometimes it's too good to be true. Plenty of times you take a ride and it's too good to be true, or it hasn't sat long enough.
Yeah.
Sometimes when you get an immediate break, it can be loaded with fish. Other times it needs to experience some turnover for some upwellings to occur. But you don't go unless you know. Or you don't know unless you go, sorry.
Yeah, I was going to say.
I was a little dyslexic.
You don't know when it's that far.
Yeah, it's not like Atlantis where, you're within 2 degrees of somebody who's been there within the last couple weeks, last week or so in the summer, like Munson and those. What are the other ones out there? There's Munson, there's
Powell, Nigrin, Corsair.
I mean, how many boats are realistically
Is there
doing
a big long line fleet out there?
There are some. There's not a lot.
Yeah.
There at one point, I think the most you saw on one trip, I've been 8 of us. 9
Okay.
of us.
That's if I had to guess, I would have said about less than 12.
A couple of buddies, they came from Montauk. They've been out for 5 days. They trolled their way out and then trolled their way back. So
I know a Jersey boat that's fished it. It's called up from Ocean City. I think they stop along the way, but
a lot of guys will do that. They'll stop in Nantucket or Hyannis or here in Falmouth and top off and then make their run.
Is it any different than like Hydro or Atlantis? Like, is there a different? Is anything feel different? Is it set up different? Like, is there any differences, or is it just another Northeast Canyon that just happens to be a little farther away?
Just to us, man, because it's so far, I'm like, it must be the promise. So you go there and like a big guy just jumps into the boat and says, "Welcome to Munson Canyon."
We had one trip. It was like that. We let out, just put this center rigger bait in the clip. Hadn't even dropped the teasers in the water, and it popped out. It was a 120-pound big eye to start the trip. So that could either be the sign of what's going to be a really good trip, or it could be the opposite. That ended up being a really good trip. We ended up with, I think, 4 or 5 big eyes, I think 4 or 5 white marlin, a blue marlin, and just countless yellowfins. But to answer your question, they're the same and they're different because they're different canyons, so they're different bottom structures.
Yeah.
You have a lot more colder shelf water coming off, so many times you'll end up with some pretty strong breaks. And you'll deal with fog out there because you have such stark temperature changes sometimes.
Okay.
But I mean, it feels different because you are way out there. You really don't see any real high flyers. You just see long line gear usually. That's about it. You don't hear a lot of radio chatter. You pick up some Canadian stuff if you're further enough east, or you'll be talking with, you can hear scallopers that are in the closed area too working. And you go across George's Bank to get there. Like you go past George's Bank to get there.
Wow.
But it's a beautiful run across. We had one run out there this year. We had blasted through a fog bank, and it was just half beak spraying, giants pushing, saw a couple swords tailing. And then other times it's 120 of those 170 miles is pea soup fog.
It kind of does sound like the promised land a little bit, Jim.
Swords tailing. So
That doesn't happen a lot.
have you ever tried to cast at them when you see them?
We tried to make a turn, but
You ever turn their head at all, or they just?
No, they went down. The ones that we saw, we tried to get a turn to see if we could see them and then get set up. But by the time we made a full boat length turn, the wake I think kind of put them down.
I mean, they used to troll them. There was a Cutty Hunk swordfish tournament where they would troll them with stuff, and I wonder if they were just seeing so many that you eventually find one that would eat. Because it doesn't seem like. I watched the Bad Company videos of them casting to them down off Southern California. It seems like one out of every. I mean, the guy caught 10 over 20 years of doing it, casting to them.
Yeah, I mean, because usually if they're up on the surface, they're not generally actively feeding. That's why they tend to be on the bottom. They're a mud marlin.
Yeah.
But they will feed like the old timers that I know. The guys that like really used to do it a lot. I shouldn't even say old timer. That's kind of mean. They out of Nantucket and even the Vineyard. They would go around and look for them on the surface, and then they would troll just like single squid back at them and just kind of drag it by its face. And it's kind of, you almost have to, from talking with them, just almost piss it off.
Kind of.
Yeah, or similar to what
Reaction
Anthony
bite.
and Bad Companies, some are eaters, some aren't.
Yeah.
Some are just probably up there digesting. That's even breaking. They'll always eat the bronze lily, the bronze shrimp.
I love that. I never heard bronze lily for that. I know the 3-eyed squid for my snag hooks, but for the harpoon, that's good.
Yeah.
It
But
never
the bronze squid.
They rarely refuse it, dude.
Have you ever fished Cultivator Shoal?
Yeah.
I was going to ask that.
This is like a common question for anybody that's ever been
We've asked that
traveled.
everybody on the podcast. We ask our freshwater guys
Yeah,
that. We
yeah,
just want to know what's
exactly.
happening.
Yeah.
There's a lot of water moving there. So it's wild. There's a lot of, you have some crazy bottom changes. Been out there and caught nothing, and been out there and caught a bunch of tunas, had some great ground fishing.
Fluke out there? Or?
What's the ground fishing like out there? When it's good.
There was a lot of cod.
Yeah.
Lots of cod, some haddock, halibut. Haven't caught the halibut, but I know guys have caught them out there. Usually we've been out there mostly just tuna fishing.
Have you caught fluke out there?
I haven't.
Because that's what I always heard about is like that's the next best thing after Nantucket Shoals. Or that's going to be the new Nantucket Shoals when that gets too pressured that you can go out to Cultivator and still find those
Nantucket
10
shoals
pound
are
fluke.
already too pressured.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I feel like it has to happen at a different time, just based on like kind of where it is and what's around it, fluke wise. I mean, I just assume that you're shaking off like 14 or 15 pound fluke to catch a 100 pound, 200 pound halibut, but that's just comes with the territory of never having been and
You have
always
a
wanted to
great
go.
imagination.
Oh, I love it.
Because the Viking headboat out of Montauk used to run cultivator trips, and that's how they made it sound like catch your 10 pound fluke or your 100 pound halibut. They're mixed in together, and I just want to know if that's the reality.
The only time I know the headboats that have gone out there were Little George's. Francis Fleet I worked on in college my freshman and sophomore year. I know in the wintertime they would do I think they were 4-day George's trips, and it's like they call it whale cod. And they go out there in like January and February for big cod. I know some guys who've been tile fishing before in the canyons and caught big fluke.
I've seen an 8 pound fluke come up
in like the 400 foot range.
Yeah, my first tile fish trip, also on the Viking. Somebody mixed it with the golden tile. Somebody got like an 8 or 9 pound fluke. At a, like you said, 400, 500
There's
feet.
no
or whatever.
fences underwater.
Yeah.
They can go anywhere.
What's your favorite offshore species to target?
I like them all for different reasons. I'm a big fan out of billfish. I'm a big fan of white marlin, just because they're difficult, and they're just beautiful. They're fun, feisty on light tackle. I mean, who doesn't love an angry blue marlin? I mean, it's a loaded question because they're all awesome.
They are all awesome for different reasons.
But I
you're
do.
right.
Big eyes are special when they come up, in a nice, calm, peaceful morning, enjoying your coffee, and then just absolute
Hell breaks loose.
detonations.
Yeah.
But if white marlin or giant bluefin, probably.
So big eyes seem to be so kind of almost cyclical, where you have like a string of good big eye years and then kind of some leaner years. Do you avoid that? Is that true even further out east, or do you tend to see more of them?
I think it's true everywhere.
Yeah.
And it could be lean years to the western canyons, southern canyons, and it can be great up here. And then there's years that off Ocean City. In southern Jersey, they're tonguing on them. Or Hudson's, 100 squares just seems to be like an ATM for them.
I remember
And then
that, yeah.
it's a lot slower out here. It's all cyclical. It's all following, the various physiological and oceanographic stuff. That's the structure when you're offshore fishing, in conjunction with bottom to help create upwellings. But it's all cyclical. I think a lot of it has to do with there's a lot of different oceanographic things that can affect what we see up here and how the eddies off the Gulf Stream break off and move in.
I know you keep pretty busy fishing, pretty much year round, different locations and whatnot, but are there any indicators that like you can be looking at now till, May, June, until you start thinking about the Northeast canyons again, that, you have eyes on certain fisheries to, be a predictor of what kind of canyon season we may see in the Northeast? Is there any kind of rule of thumb there where it's like, if this goes off here with this species, that means our canyon season's going to be a good one for that species?
Yes or no. It's hard to really say because you don't know what the eddies are going to do. It's all on how the water breaks off. Last year, beautiful counterclockwise eddies came from the way east. Got lucky and it stayed way east, which was nice to keep crowds. But it's and then we had a couple other pieces of it reformed, so we got multiple edges. And then there's some years, the last several years before this past season, got like one eddy that just kind of churned and saturated and eventually stagnated. I personally like if we have a really cold winter.
Okay.
I like seeing our water temps up here get cold. I think that helps with the altimetry further offshore when the warm water comes in and we get better upwellings. Cold water's healthy water.
Makes sense. So how soon, sorry to cut you off, Cheech, how early in the season will you start looking at the water? Do you ever,
I'll watch it all year long.
Yeah?
Because you get a feel, because you see the Gulf Stream moves. It's not just set in one area. It slides closer, it goes further offshore, it sucks in more to the west in some spots. So you do your best to try to guess what it's going to do, but you really don't know.
That was going to be my question. Like, is there a time of year, like if you see it's doing a certain thing in March, you have a good idea of what's going to happen in June, July, or it just, whatever?
My degree is not that good. What's the Hui scientist name? Dave Ross, I think.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
He wrote he wrote a really good book, like The Fisherman's Ocean.
Fisherman's Ocean, that's a great book.
Yeah. That's a really good book for anybody that wants to get into the oceanographic and physiological stuff of what goes on in the ocean, especially offshore, but also inshore with tides, currents, natural warmings and coolings of the ocean, different gyres and currents. That's a really spectacular book that Dr. Ross wrote in very layman's terms.
I got that as a
Stocking
gift.
stuffer.
I like
There you
it.
go.
I like it. It sounds like it will be at my comprehension level, which is always welcome.
Well, I could always dumb it down for you a little further.
So you
We'll
had
put
mentioned,
some pictures in there.
yes, are there pictures? There's no pictures of mount.
Comes with a crayon box.
I like that. Color by number. You mentioned giant bluefin and white marlin, and one thing I want to kind of dig into really deeply is the white marlin side of things. Tell us about your obsession with the white marlin that ultimately got you involved with the Skillie Project, or a founder even. Mm-hmm. So I'd like to know kind of that journey and bring us up to kind of today's point in time.
I liked them for the challenge.
What makes them challenging?
They got small mouths. They're persnickety little things. They will come up like Zero, and especially if you're trolling, teaser fishing. They can show up in packs and they'll whack a little bit of everything. and then leave
and eat nothing.
Yeah. More often than not, for a lot of people, they probably get more white marlin bites trolling, especially when you're way to your like shipping lanes in like Southwest. If you're getting phantom knockdowns, there's no weed on your lure or your bar or whatever you're pulling, it's probably a white marlin back there.
See, whenever that's happened to me, I'm like, little mahi is the first thing I think of. That's crazy to think how many. So people don't know how many white marlin they're potentially missing then.
Oh, all the time. Especially if you're down the shipping lanes trolling around for yellowfins and dolphins. If you get a knockdown, say you're just pulling a green machine daisy chain, knockdown, you put it like there's no weeds, you put it back up, it knocks down again, you put it back up, it's literally. I'd go to the bank that there's a white marlin back there just pestering you. Now, the difficult thing is you got to hope if you're pulling an artificial and a J hook, you got to hope that it's just going to hang itself. And then the challenge comes in to getting it closer to the boat and then feeding it a, small ballyhoo on a circle hook. And they're just a fun billfish that's, not small, not huge, but feisty.
And challenging.
Lots of acrobatics. I don't know, just always had an affinity for them. We really can't explain any one particular experience that set me off on enjoying them. Just a fish I like.
Now, have you ever like down in the Mid-Atlantic? Seems like we've got a great fishery up here, and I know the Skillie Project is learning more about that, or going to learn more about that fishery. Have you ever done it off the Carolinas, off Ocean City, Maryland?
No. No. Usually whenever I've been going through there, it's usually late season and we're stopping and passing through. But a lot of good friends do, and they can have some. There's some years they put up some crazy good numbers. They had a really good fall run this year.
Yeah, September was insane.
Where they had some great. That's their classic month for the whites is September.
Okay.
Virginia Beach gets a great fishery. Cape May, New Jersey, obviously shares a lot of the Ocean City fishery. Years ago, sometimes even the Hudson can set off to when I was running the Blondie, the Hudson had like a week or a couple weeks of just spectacular white marlin fishing. Boats were putting up, doing an overnighter and coming in with 45 flags flying. It was awesome.
Now, is the approach? Sorry, go ahead.
Is that a random deal? Is it like the ideal conditions, a mixture of bait present, water, temperature, breaks?
No different than tunas.
Yeah.
Sometimes it's stuff that we can't, stuff's going on underneath the surface that bring it together. Other times you can foresee it each year, like September, Ocean City. They're arguably the white marlin capital of the world. They know that they are definitely on a migratory path. So they do see them now, much like any fishery. Some years are going to be more lean. Some years are going to be prolific, and then there's like, they generally have a consistent fishery. The Hudson, I think that bite was, that would have been 2017, maybe 2018, I think. I think that was a confluence of all the conditions came together. A couple good boats got on them, boats that know how to, turn 1 into 2 into 3 into 4, and then, coconut telegraph a bit, and then you start seeing multiple boats start putting up numbers.
Yeah, somebody's got to get people looking for it first,
Yeah, and then in the private sport fish world, each fishery has its own network, and it's probably a lot of guys in there looking for big-eyed tuna, but there's also a bunch of guys looking for white marlin.
Now, the approach from the Mid-Atlantic to New England, you said you have a lot of friends down there. Basically fish for them the same way? Okay.
Trolling for them is all the same. We're pulling dredges, teasers, naked ballyhoo on circle hooks. It's a pretty straightforward way of fishing. Whether you're pulling four lines with hooks or if you're pulling 6 lines, all depends on skill levels of your anglers and just how a personal preference for whoever's driving the boat.
When you say turn 1 into 2 and so on, how does that? What do you mean by that?
So we're trolling. You get bit on the left long rigger. I'm going to turn the boat into your bite.
Okay.
And that's to keep your fish kind of inside from crossing the others, ideally, and every other line stays in the water. And we're trying to put the baits into clean water away from the wake, because most billfish are schooling fish, and there's an old adage that the best billfish teaser is a jumping billfish on the line. So usually we'll try to do, I might try to do 1 or 2 full turns, full boat length circles with everything still in the water, just letting your fish run, jump. The belly and the line's going to keep it hooked.
Okay.
And it's hope that then Cheech gets bit, whether he's on a flat line or a rigger. And then it gets a little bit more technical where we start moving stuff from a flat line up to a rigger to keep stuff in order in the spread. But you can, get into where you got 4 on and another still in the teaser. So someone grabs a pitch rod, throws that out, and now you get yourself a 5-banger.
So that's the difference between a professional crew and, like, if it was me, him, and Megan out there, we'd be celebrating the first bite.
Yeah.
And
I'd pay top dollar to watch you guys try all that.
It would be a mess.
That would be gold.
I gladly accept. Yeah, that means that I'm out marlin fishing, and that's never a bad day in my book.
It's a pretty choreographed dance. It all starts with communication. Like, all the best fishing in big game is done when everyone's communicating well, from the bridge to the cockpit, and then the mates are communicating to the anglers. And if you got clear, calm, concise communication, it looks like a beautifully orchestrated dance.
You've got this affinity for chasing white marlin, and you decided to take some action on the conservation side of things, and with some other people founded the Skillie Project. Tell us a little bit more about that project, what its goal is, what its mission is.
We already try to tag billfish, tuna, even dolphins, anyways, with traditional spaghetti tags.
Mm-hmm.
And then Matt Rissell.
Yep.
You guys know Matt well. Him and I just goofing around talked about, like, making a kind of a funny spaghetti western spoof style fishing film. And as we talked about it, I was like, you know what? We should probably put some satellite tags in some of these fish. Be cool to see where they all go. That turned into, I reached out to Peter Chai Bongzai, who's the director of the Billfish Foundation, and just kind of pitched an idea if the TBF would be, we already tagged for them anyways, if they would be interested in a sat tagging study. And it snowballed really quick, and became this grassrooted community collaborative with the University of Maine. Got the support from the Healy family and the Viking Yacht Company, the Billfish Foundation, Costa Del Mar. The industry support really it snowballed. So we kind of had call it a pilot run this past year with the help. We had Robbie Goodwin with the Scup Slayer operation.
One of the best boat names in the Northeast,
yes.
by the way.
And his father and our friend, Mike Lindley's father, Doug Lindley, the two of them actually pioneered white marlin fishing off Nantucket and the islands. So it's, much of what I know how to do comes directly from conversation with Robbie and Mikey's father, Doug. So having Robbie involved, just knowing how to do it, and he'd done tagging studies, tagging work with Greg Scommel before. So we very quickly, assembled this group of people between fishermen, videographers such as Matt, Peter and the Billfish Foundation, University of Maine with Dr. Walt, and Sammy Nadeau. It came together super quick with just everybody involved in wanting to see what these white marlin do from up here, because they're pretty understudied billfish.
That's what I was going to say. There's not nearly as much out there on white marlin as there is on
blue marlin, swordfish. So we've got some theories and hypotheses that, there's some, corroboration of those with spaghetti tags, but it's very limited. So science is data, good data is volume. So our hope is we're going to hopefully open up, our eyes to what they're doing migratory wise.
Mm-hmm.
Hopefully, possibly, because we tend to see some offshore of here. We see some pretty large ones. So I want to see if, where are they potentially spawning? If your largest populations are here, some areas in the East Atlantic, and then down off Brazil. So if we can, with the help of community doing it, industry support for tags because the tags are
Expensive.
very expensive. But the data is totally worth it, and it'll help with understanding the species, improving fisheries management from the ICAT side on the internet. Because they are a highly migratory species that we do think there could be similar to bluefin.
Making transatlantic migrations.
Possibly. That's what we hope to find out. You get some odd in tagged fish with traditional spaghetti tags that do show that in a multitude of species. But then if we can show that, or even if it's a hard north-south migration, because there's parts of Mexico, Isla Mujeres gets a pretty good little white marlin bite in the springtime. Brazil is good. Cap Cana, Dominican Republic gets a great white marlin fishery. The Bahamas can have a great white marlin fishery at certain times a year. So
to me, the white marlin fishery, as I knew it, kind of ended at like North Carolina. I didn't even.
You'll see them off South Florida.
Yeah.
Not in any crazy numbers, but people catch them kite fishing for sailfish.
And you said that we get some of the biggest ones up here. I mean, kind of to put an exclamation point on that, I know the junior world record was just caught this past summer, which was a 118 pounder.
118, that was a big one.
That's a massive.
Yeah, it's $1 million fish if you catch that in the Mid-Atlantic, the right month of the year.
Got that.
Multi-million-dollar fish. So yeah, we see, and they get some big ones down there too. So our hope is that from here, doing the New England Northeast white marlin with the Skilly Project, as we grow it, we're going to move down into ideally South Jersey, Ocean City, and just start building data with, are these same stocks? Do they have a mixing, or are they a completely different migratory body of fish that they see in the Mid-Atlantic that we see up here? And then hopefully it just, with each coming year, we just keep expanding it and paint this, really robust picture of what white marlin are doing. And
it's very cool.
Is in addition to the satellite tagging, is there like a kind of genetic component to? Are you taking any samples of the fish? Are these all big females up here?
We're going to with there's an unaffiliated research project. I believe I've got the stuff on the boat where we're going to try to take, if we can safely, not harm the fish, because we're not taking any of the fish out of the water. They stay in the water all the time. If we can get a fin sample, we are going to start trying to, for another scientist and project, just because we're already going to be handling them, get finlets or clips for genetic sampling.
That'll be so interesting. You've deployed 5 tags so far, is that right?
We got 5 out this past summer, and our hope is, I think we're going to shoot for like 20.
Okay.
This next summer. And the key is also knowing that you've got a white marlin, because we do get round scale spearfish can mix in up here.
Even on the inside the canyon grounds too?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, you see them. You'll see them in the shipping lanes or whatnot. I've seen them in the dump.
So round scale spearfish, could you just, for the layman, including me, tell us what that is?
Forever it was known as a hatchet marlin.
Okay.
They look very, very similar to a white marlin at glance. They tend to have, a little bit rounded. Their dorsals are somewhat rounded. Their pectoral fins are somewhat rounded, looking like paddles. I think they tend to have more robust colors, and I know some guys in Ocean City would probably back that up. Almost look like a glowworm. They're bright neon, whereas whites have a bit more of a silvery green and bands, kind of like striped marlin. And then there's some physiological stuff that you can look at, in anatomical ways of looking at, like space from a ventral fin to an anus.
That's
the brachiostecal, which is part of the gill that comes down. It's like whether it comes in as I believe it comes in kind of underneath a gill plate or stays squared off. You can count gill rakers. Some of it you need the fish to be essentially harvested. But for the most part, I think you can look at color-wise. They tend to be they're glowing blue.
So if you've seen enough of both, then you can you can.
That's the problem. If you've never seen a white marlin before and you catch a hatchet marlin, you're like, I got a white.
It's close enough that all major tournaments score them
the same.
No, but we're not as, from a scientific perspective, there's just not enough of them to be worried about them, or why aren't we studying them as well?
Oh, there are scientists who are studying those. They only just discerned them as a separate species, I think, in 2006.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. So it's a relatively new species.
Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales knows that a great boat dealer is as important as a great boat. Why? Because new or used, you're buying a boat with 100 different systems and components that need tuning, training, troubleshooting, and sometimes repair. While most boat dealers are your best friend only until the sale is closed, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales has developed a bulletproof reputation for building long-term relationships with their customers. Before, during, and most importantly, after the sale. Go ahead, ask around. We challenge you to find anyone who has anything but great things to say about Tom O'Toole and his team. With 6 locations from Freeport, Maine to Jupiter, Florida, including Marblehead, Massachusetts, and 3 offices on Cape Cod, Buzzards Bay Yacht Sales is committed to providing the best possible product, customer service, and support for both recreational boaters and passionate sport fishermen. It's true, who you buy from is as important as what you buy. Visit buzzardsbayyacht.com today. You have the color to differentiate. If you have the experience to know, that color looks different than all the whites I've seen. You mentioned the rounding of the fins. Is that
White Marlin have? So even White Marlin can look a little bit. They'll flash colors of blue.
Yeah.
All billfish do light up. But like for the average person, say if you're in the shipping lanes, where smaller blue marlin can push up to.
Yeah.
A blue marlin has a really sharp, almost sickle type dorsal fin, very sharp pectoral fins. White marlin have very rounded dorsal fins, and their pec fins are rounded too. They almost look like penguin paddles.
Yeah.
There's actually, if you go on the Skillie Project website, there's a great picture from one of the tagging days this past summer. On the vessel, I think it was on the vessel, might have been Scupslayer or Whiskey, I forget which one, but they got a picture of a broadside greyhounding white that is as good as you're ever going to get for species identification. It shows it's got its green hues, its blue bands, you see the rounded dorsal, the rounded pec fin. It is the perfect identification picture.
I know the shot you're talking about. The colors are brilliant on that fish.
They're vibrant.
That's a great shot.
Proportionally, for how many round scale spearfish do you catch? Like, is it a 10-to-1 white marlin to spearfish?
No, there's no idea.
Yeah.
I have to look back in a lot of video. I mean, my logs, I even log them in my log generally as, unless I've definitively said, oh, that's a spearfish, it's logged as a white marlin. There's lots of times if we get the fish up and it's still pretty hot, we'll get it close and, cut the leader close to the hook. And we try not to grab the fish if we don't have to.
What hooks do you use?
I'm a big fan of mustads.
Okay.
And VMCs. Just gonna play with some BKKs this winter. But generally, mustad makes it's called the old style circle hook. I forget the exact serial number, but that's probably my go-to hook. 7.0 or 8.0.
And pretty thin wire, for them, or?
It's the same. I'd use the hook for striped bass.
Okay. Going back to the fishery on Nantucket, you said that you worked with some of the pioneers who kind of helped you figure out your program for them. How long does that go back? The white marlin fishery there.
Robbie's. I mean, as a kid, he was one of the pioneers too. Him and his brother fishing on their dad's boat with Dougie Lindley and then some other island guys. They I want to say 80s.
Okay.
It coincided with when the sword fishery, when they used to go offshore and look for we touched on it at the beginning, the surface swords, they used to troll for them. They, when the swords went down, they realized they'd get some white marlin bites or see some white marlin come up. So then they started targeting them just as a byproduct of the swordfish going down.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, you'll still see some swordfish, down the shipping lanes and whatnot in the surface. We hooked one on Mulberry Canyon years ago trolling.
Wow.
Mm-hmm.
Damon got a big sword trolling at night, right?
Yeah. A bunch of guys will get them. You hear about them at night, guys trolling, looking for big eyes and whatnot, that they'll come up and eat a ballyhoo. They're active at night too, anyways.
But I imagine the transition from swords to the whites seem they're much more willing to eat on the surface, I would think.
Oh, no, not always.
No?
There's sometimes that it's a fishery that it's year to year. I mean, I know you guys got out last year. Last year there was a good little stretch where there was some good numbers. This next year it could be, we might get 1 week, 2 week of them early. Several years ago, in September, we had a spectacular week fishing for them. So it's a really talk about something that's heavily dictated by physiological conditions.
Yeah.
So you don't know. It
Doesn't happen every year.
It's not like bluefin where it's like, all right, we're going to go to the dump. There's going to be school bluefin there. We're going to go to Crab Ledge. We're going to go to the Regal Sword. There's no set predictor for where they're going to show up, how many are going to show up. Some years, we've had years where we've gone out and only seen, trolling, whether we're trolling or they're on the surface, 1, maybe 2 a trip, if that. And then other years, it'll be like almost desolate. We'll get like 1 or 2 days, they'll be good, and then they're gone overnight.
Do you
go ahead.
We had to get back in the rhythm, Jim.
It's been a while since we did a podcast together.
Do you prefer to troll, or do you prefer to sight fish them when they're up?
Both.
Yeah.
They're both fun. They're both very different. Sight fishing, obviously sight fishing anything. Whether you're sight fishing bonefish, stripers, albies, anything that's a visual when a fish is cutting on a surface. Sailfish, I mean, you name it.
Yeah.
It's anything that's visual is obviously very exciting and fun.
It raises the chips a little bit, the stakes a little bit, because you can see it.
Trolling and teaser fishing, it's a different type of feed. It's a different type of bite. Because you're actually aggravating that fish. It's now in a hunt kill mode.
Okay.
Usually if most fish are on the surface, they're not actively feeding on bait, they're not in a hunting feeding mentality. They're just cruising.
Is that
Think when you see a striper on the flats, if it's not actively hunting something, just look at its body language.
Yeah.
It's just cruising. Same with billfish are the same way. We see sailfish down south or in the Pacific, when they're just tailing or cruising, sometimes they're just coasting down sea. Versus when you're trolling for, we'll stay with billfish, white marlin, when they come up on a teaser, you've like hit that switch in them.
Yeah.
So, because that's right, they're staying on the teaser, they're coming in, you're bringing them in closer feet, and you're getting these very aggressive bites.
So my white marlin experience is 2 fish, but at each end of the spectrum you're describing. The first one came up in a
I thought you were the Skilly King though, like in Oklahoma. Tulsa King.
I am. Yeah, they
I mean, Falmouth has the Skilly King.
He actually, it's funny that you brought that up.
I think there was a track just cut on iTunes.
He's known. He's world renowned as the Skilly Man. You know what? We're gonna.
You just downloaded it, right? You bought it.
Little 60-second. For instance, like this has been firing up the charts.
It might be double platinum right now.
I can't control the thing.
You can kind of see the Ocean City, the Skilly capital of the world.
You're gonna let this rip for a little bit.
I mean, in the little ditty, it even says it when Megan taught him.
Megan's playing the flute.
No, I can't be.
The Marlin jumped out, shaking his bill.
I deserve it.
But Jimmy held on with a
Who doesn't love a sea shanty about Skilly?
He's the Skilly Man fighting the waves.
So I'm surprised we don't have a mural right here. It's like King Louie.
Oh, really? I can't believe you did this.
20 seconds, Jim. Let it finish.
On the day of fishing's rise, in that moment
Sketchy.
of eye
Oh,
contact,
it's okay.
Jimmy
My kids
knew
love it.
he'd become the Skilly Man, a title so true. This valiant fight will go down.
Do you have posters that we can get signed?
I'll work some up for you.
A legendary mystery.
In time for Christmas?
Oh, we got enough time. We got a printer upstairs.
So that's how Jimmy became the Skilly Man.
He gets Sly Stallone could play him on film.
I think that would be perfect.
I'm a little younger, but in worse shape. Anyhow, yeah, so we caught that fish this summer, and I texted Alex Blackwell, who's our video producer. He goes, did you get it done? I go, they'll sing songs of this day. I was going, in fact, compose me a song about me as the skit. Anyhow, I didn't think he'd actually do it. I didn't think he'd actually play it here. But going back to what I was saying, I've caught 2. I caught one troll. It came up in a trolling spread and hit. It was one of the angriest fish I've ever seen. It felt like it hit everything before it finally found a hook. And then the one we caught that was cruising, was much more. It was much like he went over and ate. He's like, I guess I'll eat it. You know, he came over and ate the live bait. So
it wasn't already actively hunting.
yeah.
Both of which were no match for the Skilly man, I will say. So when
You need a new license plate.
I was driving around town with the flag on my.
dude,
on
he
my
literally
Forerunner
bought a
for while.
flag and was flying it from his antenna in his vehicle after.
You know what we
after he
do
got
when
it done.
flags are only supposed to fly for like 24 hours. Normally, if we find a boat if their flag is still flying, we take it and rivet it to the dock.
Oh, well,
Yeah, and
so-
I mean, do you ever jump in the water after your first white marlin?
I didn't.
Oh, we might have to go down to the harbor today.
I'll do it.
So like is that like a world like
Yeah,
billfish deal? First
Yeah,
billfish or any
Oh.
new billfish?
yeah, and first billfish for sure. We'll say first billfish of a species just for another reason to throw someone in
Yeah.
the water. Usually try to do it while fishing out there.
So then you have to come circle
That's
back.
up there with like eating the heart of your first tuna,
Yeah,
pretty
exactly.
much, right?
Yeah, totally. It's just part of a little bit of tradition in hazing.
Hazing's fun.
You know, we give people the option. They can jump in the water themselves offshore. Or when we get back to the dock,
You don't see it
jump in
coming.
yourself, or do not have anything in your pockets because we will lead you up to the bow or on the dock, pick you up, and throw you up.
I love those little traditions of the things like that. You know, it feels like offshore has quite a few of them. I mean, the flag flying in itself is one that.
Yeah. You know,
Where did
flag-
that start?
Uh,
Do you know?
that's a good question. I don't know.
Oh yeah.
I want to say. I could say Hawaii, but no, because they used to use the little red flags. You see those in a lot of the old
My dad used to
South
fly
Florida sailfish pictures.
a red flag when he was hooked up, and
They
then when
used
he
to do
caught his
that,
fish, he'd put his tuna.
And they'd
flag
have
up.
but then they'd also have the little red triangles.
Yeah.
Like if you put up, you'd have to say a sailfish flag, and if you caught 6, you'd have the sailfish flag and like 5 red triangles. Or if you know they're only sail fishing, then just be all little red triangles. That's a good question. I don't know exactly where the origination is. I think the billfish community really jumped on it a lot.
No pun intended.
Yeah. And then it depends on where you are, whether it's, some places fly them right side up all the time. I come from the school of if you harvest it, fly it right side up. If you let them go, upside down.
Mm-hmm.
Which always seemed
Always
counterintuitive.
start
to me.
with the starboard rigger.
Yeah, right. It does kind of seem counterintuitive.
I never thought of it that way.
Like an upside down. Think of my goldfish in the tank. If he's
Yeah.
upside down, he's having problems.
And then there's some areas where we don't, out of respect for local communities, or you just get such high numbers, you just don't fly flags, or you wait. If you're a private operation, you don't fly flags. You let the charter boats fly them.
Like the week after, or maybe even the same week, it was within a week from when Jimmy got out and they filmed that episode, which is going to be coming out in season 23 of Angling Adventures. You'll get a chance to see Jimmy and Chris go out on a 23 skeeter.
Is the song going to be on it?
It might have to be now.
I think it's replacing our theme song.
It might, yeah. So they got it done in a bay boat out there on a grease calm day, and I had a chance to go out. I actually lost my boat that we were going to be fishing on within 36 hours of when we were supposed to go fishing, and I just started dialing for somebody like, who wants to go marlin fishing, and can you bring a boat? And someone from the North Shore came down, Captain Anthony 40. And I'm like, hey, you're bringing your boat, and it's me and my buddy, and whoever you want to bring. He's like, sure.
Cheech basically invited him to go fishing on his own boat.
So, anyways, we
Smart.
Yeah, it's why he's a salesman.
we get out there, and it was one of those grease calm days. And like, how do you know? Like, can you tell when you're approaching a fish like this one's gonna eat, or is it just luck of the draw?
For the most part, luck of the draw.
Yeah.
I mean, same with even trolling for them too. There's some you'll see them come up on the teaser and they're not that lit up or that engaged, and you might get a bite, you might not. Some of them are just window shoppers.
It kind of, like, as we were going through, I think we saw maybe 5 or 6, and it might have been more, but I think some of them were the same fish that would end up going down and coming back up. And it was amazing to me that, like, after the 3rd try, maybe it would just be like, you just had to kind of cut bait with it and be like, you know what, let's go find another one. And as soon as you got a bait, and the only one bite we did get, it was instant. You knew right away. It acted different, responded different. It lit up. It just, everything about it was different. And I'm like, oh, I think this thing's gonna eat.
Sometimes water temp can play a role.
Yeah.
You know, even if it's a 1 degree difference. Same with whether you got them on top or trolling. You know, if you're dealing with breaks, sometimes it's, are they on the cold side or the hot side? That's going to dictate a fish's behavior.
Yeah.
So how long will you stick with the fish? So trolling is one thing. It's, you're not going to scare it out of the spread. But if you're sight casting the one, how many chances will you give it? Do you know right away if he's going to eat? Will you stick with him for 10 minutes, 20 minutes, or just give him 2 shots and then move on?
No, we'll give him like 10 minutes or so. Okay. Sometimes try a couple different baits if we have different offerings, just to see if for some reason, you know, maybe he doesn't like carrots and he wants steak.
What baits do you try to keep? If you could put whatever you wanted in the well and you're going to go sight fish white marlin, what are you going to have in there?
Anything that's small.
Yeah.
Anything that's small and usually silvery.
Mm-hmm.
You know, everyone usually grabs scub.
Yeah.
Just because it's readily available.
Yeah.
But, you know, dead ballyhoo, use those plenty of times. Squid.
Snapper blues.
Yeah. Amberines. Blue runners. Small like offshore herring if we've been able to jig them up.
So you've done them with dead ballyhoo. So like,
And fly.
Is there anything to it where like,
Wait, on the fly?
Mm-hmm.
White marlin up here?
Mm-hmm.
No way.
Mm-hmm.
Now, was that a bait and switch situation, or just you?
I've done both.
Okay, cool.
I was gonna go there next with artificials. Have you done anything outside of fly on the artificial side of things?
Years ago when Hoagie just came out with the Hoagies, we actually used them quite a bit if we couldn't find bait, or if we, you know, we're out trolling, we'd use Hoagies, because we used them as pitch baits. No Sancocho. We just wired egg sinker in, put on a hook, put on a flat line, and it just swims just like a ballyhoo.
Yeah.
And if the fish comes up on it, especially, it's good if someone's like, if you want to learn pitch baiting, then use a Hoagie as a pitch bait, because unless it rips the Hoagie off, it's not going to knock its tail off. You know, in Sancocho, it's going to keep coming on it, so you can learn how to feed. I think Jamie Boyle years ago, I remember seeing a video of him using the Hoagies, I believe it was. I've heard of some people, you know, having like a bass popper on board and throwing like a storm chug bug at them.
And they respond. They ate it.
Yeah, I mean, it's no different than if you get a fish that's hungry.
There was somebody this year that like threw a 200-gram tuna jig, like metal tuna jig at it, and the thing chased it down and ate it.
Right.
There were a couple of those this year.
That's right.
Usually,
But
we were
that was
shark
Jersey.
fishing years ago and caught one on a bluefish fillet.
That happened.
Cable, big 7698 offset 10-0.
That happened this year inside, like real inside, like inside of Cox's, like Browns or something like that. And the guy with sharkfish caught a skilly.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of them during the summer if you can go down off Block Island.
Yeah.
Like where everyone was, where was that? Ryan's Horn.
Mm-hmm.
They'll all be bad.
There's a lot
They're
of
all
fish
down
around
in
this
there
year.
too.
There was a lot of whites around this year.
And Block Island forever used to have the Block Island Invitational, Billfish Invitational. For many years, you had Block Island's Billfish Tournament, Cuddy Hunks, Nantuckets.
I think I want to try to do one on an artificial fly. Would be so cool. Is there any trick to it, or does you just get the bait in front of them and hope they respond?
Yeah, hope you get a year that there's a good body of them, so you don't burn you might only see one fish.
Yeah.
You want to waste it on a fly?
No. Especially with the way
I mean,
I
you
cast.
can put a scup on the fly.
You find it on a fly rod. He used to do that with. He's got a 40-pound striper on the fly. Of course,
it was on a herring chunk, but still
Did you
fought it on
cast it or just feed it
Oh,
up?
I just dropped it down behind the boat in the chum slick, and I did that because I wanted to catch a really big striper on the fly. I did that for an entire day one time and caught.
Were you behind Willie's boat?
No, I was with my old man and my uncle, and I got snagged on the bottom at one point. My uncle's like, "Just lean into it." Snapped my Fenwick in half. I was pissed, but he felt bad because he gave me the bad advice.
And you were
and got me
chunking
new one.
with a.
I was chunking with a fly rod. Dude.
Yeah.
I got what I deserved. But it was fun fighting them.
Charles Darwin wrote a book about that kind of behavior.
Yeah, those were the days.
So you fished a ton of different places. Of the other destinations you fish, have you brought anything? What's been the most productive thing you've brought from there, and where was it that you've then applied to our fishery here in the Northeast New England?
And vice versa.
I won't say that anything I've brought, stuff that I've just was already being implemented here by people before me, but I was able to. I learned how to do it, and then therefore learned how to do it effectively. Offshore fishing, teasers, dredges, whatever, that works in the Pacific, the Caribbean, Mid-Atlantic, up here.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts are the same. Basically.
It's all the same. Kite fishing, for bluefins, it's nothing new. I just by fortune of being able to go to places for work and learn how to do something effectively or more effectively, and then be able to apply those lessons learned here. Like fish multiple kite baits for bluefins. There's
one's hard enough.
Now, is that something you
dredge and teaser fishing, not just putting them out and pulling them, but knowing how to manipulate them so that it's, we can turn one fish into two fish into three fish. Because the teasers and dredges aren't just for billfish. That's I think a misnomer up here. Like they help you with everything. Tunas, dolphins, they will all come to them.
Best teaser still the boat.
I mean, yeah, they're harmonics.
Yeah.
That's right. There's some boats that are fishy boats. Whether there's some wooden boats that are just they're something else. A lot of it has to do with understanding RPMs and harmonics.
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, the boats definitely plays a major role.
So there's got to be some sort of relationship with the speed that the boat is most fishy at when it's at
It
when
can
it's
depend on the
troll.
species too, because you're giving off different harmonics, different decibel levels, and certain species respond to different sound levels.
Do you know of anybody that has gone deep into that rabbit hole to kind of perfect the art of
Oh yeah, there's a bunch of Peter B. Wright, legendary captain.
Yeah.
He wrote about it, talked about it. There's guys who've gone down that and just figuring out, where you can use equipment to find out at what RPMs and what your trolling valves are when you're at a certain speed to achieve a specific decibel. And then that can explain why there's some boats where, say, trolling for bluefin, their magic number is 3.8 knots.
Yeah.
But it's not so much the speed, it's probably what the sound those engines are putting out underwater.
That's awesome.
There's
does it
some
mimic like a dragger, maybe? For the bluefin, I always think if you're mimicking
you
the
can
boats.
get a bucket with some chains and pick them up, put them down, sound like a scalloper hauling back. I mean, that all fish have ears; they can hear, so that all plays a role in it. I know some guys who will actually change their propellers whether they're fishing for billfish or tunas. Not a lot, but I have heard of it.
Wow.
Or if they'll go from say July and August fishing for tunas, this is in mid-Atlantic, and then they're like, oh, it's white marlin season. We got to switch out, put on our other propellers because it's different bubbles, different noise.
That's wild.
That is something.
Can I ask one more white marlin question?
Sure, Jim.
Do you know why they're called skillies?
I was literally going to ask the same question.
I thought you'd have that answer.
I have his explanation for it.
My understanding is I've always known it. It's short. It's abbreviated for skilligally, which was, if I recall correctly, it's a Portuguese term for I think it was a type of soup or chowder or some sort of cuisine made, and white marlin would be used for it. I could be way off base, or I might only have half truths there. But I do know it is skilligally is the original full length term.
That's on Wikipedia, skilligally as a nickname for them. So that's the other place I've seen it. I had no idea it had any association with the soup. But.
Yeah, it's because it's Portuguese. I think it's Portuguese term. It might even be Native American term. Not entirely sure. Somewhere in there's it's rooted in another language besides English.
So I had I had Eric DeHedeville on the podcast, and he had said that the locals called them or referred to them as skillies because when they were prepping for harpoon and swordfish, they would practice on white marlin before they would basically let somebody throw the harpoon. They're like, if you can get a skilly, then you can graduate to the big leagues. And when we see a sun and sword, we'll give you a crack at it. And it was practiced back when.
Oh yeah.
And that's what he claimed they came
pictures
from.
of,
and I was like, that's actually really cool.
The
They're
sword
honing their
fishermen
skills on them.
having like dumpsters full of them.
Yeah.
But I think I think Skilly predates that.
Yeah. It sounds right.
And I want to say Portuguese for some reason, but it could be Native American.
I heard it.
I think it's
Portuguese.
Portuguese. Portugal has long had a huge white marlin population.
Isn't the world record from the Azores, or is it Brazil?
Brazil, Brazil's got a lot of them. So does Morocco.
Okay.
But a lot of those Moroccan fish are, they share a lot of the same waters as the Portuguese fish. I think a lot of them are the same stock. Yeah, Brazil's got some really, really big ones. And the Bahamas too.
So the world record is it 180?
And 180, 181. It's a big fish. It's like 100. It's like 110, 112 inches if I'm recalling the record book correctly. It's a big fish.
That's a really big fish. What's
Awesome.
the average size you think you see?
The most common size whites, especially if, say, from Ocean City to up here, they're 40, 50, 60-pound fish.
Okay.
No, they're just like a little bit bigger than your average South Florida sailfish, but they're long. They look bigger than what they weigh.
Yeah.
I have no gauge for like looking at the one that I caught last year. I have no idea how heavy it is.
If you catch a 75-pound white, they'll look thick, kind of like a bulldog, and that's a big white, 75, 80 pounds. But you'll see it, and it's got the bill. They all got big rudders. Billfish all got big rudders on them. So you may think it's 100 pounds, but it's 75 pounds.
Yeah, I was comfortable saying 65 to 70, which
always guess low.
Yeah,
Always.
probably means for me. I always guess higher, so it's probably more like 50. I saw a really tiny one while tuna fishing last year off Block Island, and man, it couldn't have been much more than 4 feet long. It was one of the smallest ones I've seen. And he spooked right away. I threw a Ronzi at it and spooked the living daylights out of him.
Could have been a round scale. They tend to be a little bit smaller.
Okay.
And they will push up in there. But we see the small whites too. We'll catch some in the canyons. We've seen them where they're like 100 pounds. And then caught them in the like paperweights. 40, 35 pounds.
Do we tend to see a bigger class of fish the further north that you're fishing? Like,
I think that has to do with most big game species anyways. Yeah. We're going to be on the northern range of what their temperature tolerances are. We generally see, look at bluefin's different because they're kind of a temperate water fish. But blue marlin, we tend to see larger blue marlin up here by average. You really don't see like your 100-pounders, 80-pounders you will in some parts of the Caribbean.
Smaller yellowfin though, on the flip side.
Not always.
Yeah,
you get some big yellowfins here. 100 pounds not uncommon.
Yeah.
Your yellowfin from a couple years ago was
a special one.
One of the most stunning.
Big giant
fish,
sickles on it, and that was cool to get an Allison yellowfin up here. That was a special fish.
And then inshore, it seems to kind of flip around where you tend to get more juvenile, fish at the northern range of like when you see king mackerel or something come up here and there's a run of them, they're all way smaller than that species typically runs.
I think because they're mixing in with the Spanish. And, I don't think they're in here as like a huge migratory population, more so that they're mixed in with the Spanish. A lot of people misidentify them as a large Spanish.
Mm-hmm.
If anatomically you don't know what you're looking at. A juvenile king's got yellow spots.
Yeah.
You just have the
drop.
It's the lateral line.
Yeah. Yep.
It's again no fences. We've seen like 200-pound blue marlin up here, and it's just not common.
What's the meanest fish you have encountered? That like individual fish.
Like pound for pound?
No,
meanest?
like the
what catch stands out?
Yeah, what fish have you hooked that you were like, wow, that might have been the meanest fish I've ever dealt with? Could be any species, just one that was just different. The way it fought, the way it ate, whatever.
some big eyes have been, full of piss and vinegar. Amberjacks, reef donkeys.
Yeah.
They're, they have attitude problems. Meanest? I mean, there's some blue marlin that are just, that's an aggressive animal. They are, especially if they're trying to eat something. Yeah. They're you got to be on your toes, whether you're driving the boat, you're a leader, and you're the angler, you're just spectating, because if they, you don't know, and they can make a split-second turn, and they can easily join you inside the boat.
On a typical season, how many blue marlin do you come across? Up here, specifically.
Not a ton for us. We don't necessarily spend a lot of time overly targeting them. Again, we're still business of making smiles. We're just looking to have a fun time and bend rods. Some years we've seen none. Some years, we might see one or two come up in a trip, whether we hook it or not, or land it, because you jump plenty off, especially with lures if you're not pitch baiting it. But there's some times where you can really target them up here, and there's guys who'll have 4, 5, 6, 7 fish days.
Is it more than just like throwing out one big bait? Like to really see them, you have to. Are you dedicating the whole spread to them? There's no like.
The one we caught last year, say the blue and white islander with the ballyhoo.
Okay.
The big one we caught last year. Elephants eat peanuts. Yeah. And it came up, didn't even go anything near teasers or larger offerings specifically there for it. But a blue and white islander ballyhoo has caught probably more blue marlin in the Atlantic or oceans than any other.
I'm 1 for 1. I caught my one on a candy apple red shoot way back. Some meat on it. I kind of thought it was a big eye until I started feeling what it was doing. I'm like, something's not right here. Never even
stretched out, scoped out high.
No, deep.
Stayed down.
Sometimes never came up, never jumped until we saw color. It was the first time I was like, and I had wanted to catch a blue marlin. I fished Kona, St. Lucia, Costa Rica during marlin season, and didn't even see one. And that was my first encounter. Was out of my backyard. It was awesome. It was a nice surprise.
You can do things to specifically target them, especially if the water's there. I mean, they'll be an area where there's blue-green water, but they generally prefer hot water, deeper water. But and no fences, they'll come up on the bank.
What's the closest inshore you've seen a blue?
Dump.
Yeah.
No way, really?
Mm-hmm.
Wow.
That's awesome.
I want to think. I think Roland Beamish years ago in the Jollymont. I want to say he caught one.
I think Cam talked about
say
that.
Like Tyler's Gap, maybe. It was really far inshore because I think
so crazy.
There were a bunch of us out there. There was a bunch of yellowfins and some wahoos were in tight.
Yeah.
And I remember seeing there's like a big puff of smoke, and he was just getting after it. And I think it was Tyler's Gap. It was somewhere inside 50 fathoms, and he's like, "We got a blue marlin." But yeah, I've seen him come up in the dump on fishing for bluefins. Come up on a spreader bar.
I want a who next. I want a lot of things next, but
You can get some nice wahoo up here.
Yeah,
there's some really good wahoo. I mean, Damon's got that massive one that's the state record, but you can consistently find some really quality wahoo up here.
It's awesome.
Focus on them in like late August, September.
Yeah.
Quantum is back and saltier than ever with the new Benchmark and Strive saltwater spinning reels. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 series and albies and fluke on my 2500 series. Last season, I used the Benchmark in the surf from Cape Cod to New Jersey, catching bass and blues on my 6000 model and albies and fluke on my 2500 model. The seal lock protection and IPX6 water resistance rating kept the reel performing flawlessly through every splash, spray, and accidental dunking. The best-in-class carbon fiber drag stayed smooth and put the boots to the fish. I cannot wait to break these reels back out when the stripers return in the spring. Also available is the new Quantum Myth High Modulus Carbon Fiber Rods. Built with Sea Guide corrosion-resistant guides for friction-free line flow and premium cork handles, these inshore rods pair perfectly with the Benchmark and Strive reels. To learn more about Quantum's triumphant return to the saltwater scene, visit quantum.com. Quantum, tested beyond limits.
What's next on your new species to check off that you really want to get done?
I want to catch weird shits now. It's weird stuff now.
Like how weird?
Like you question whether you want to pick it up or not. I want to catch. Yeah, I'd love to do it. But we said permit earlier. Yeah, probably a permit. Just because there's something about them. I don't know. Maybe African pompano. Haven't seen one of those before. And heard they're pretty goody. No, Opa.
Yes.
I catch an Opa, I'm retiring.
So
Especially up here.
There were a couple caught in the last month.
I sent them to you.
The longliner got
The
five.
longliner has got a mess of them with some pomfret.
Pomfret aren't uncommon up here. You'll find them.
But Oprah are less common. I know that. But like he had a run of them, and you never know because it's Instagram and you can put whatever you want on there. But all their trips around that were saying Hudson, and they were going to the Hudson and coming back from the Hudson, and then they found a mess of Opa in the Hudson. Is that just like a freak deal?
I think
or
is
it late season?
I
thing?
don't know. I know people who caught them day dropping in the middle of the summer before it's.
Rod and Reeler caught one off Maryland a couple years ago.
That's right.
But
Those
I
are
didn't know there
delicious.
was a Hudson. I've never eaten them.
I had one in Hawaii. It was amazing.
It's like 5 different cuts of meat on them too.
There's like 5 different cuts, and they all taste like they're from a different fish, texture wise.
Like a cousin of the sunfish, the mola mola, eats jellyfish and it tastes that good.
Yeah, and mola mola.
Has anybody tried to eat a mola though? You
Yeah,
know, like,
they eat them in like they're in like the Japanese or Chinese markets and stuff, and they look like jellyfish when they're cut open. It looks gross.
there was a video of somebody cleaning one. You're right,
and they somehow
it did
said
not
it's
look
crunchy.
appetizing.
I'm like, that slime is crunchy. That doesn't make any
And
sense.
Opa would be an incredible catch here. I mean, in
I wouldn't
Southern
even know how to clean
California,
it.
they're rare.
Anywhere.
Yeah.
I mean, I catch an Opa. It's like hanging them up.
Yeah, I'm taking it
done.
right to the clam man. I'm gonna be like, cut this thing for me, because at least he's probably cut a few, and then I definitely get that thing mounted.
Oh, 100%. Yeah. Oh, and Opa. Like, if we're gonna go like really shoot for the stars, Opa on a new species. I'd like to see APs, the African pompanos, just because I've been all the years I've spent in Florida, I just haven't seen one. We don't really fish a lot of areas, like spend a lot of time wreck fishing, so it would definitely be a bycatch on like a down rod while sail fishing. What other weird stuff would I want to catch? I'd like a really big rooster fish. Never caught a 50, 60 pound rooster.
Species. Is there anything left to check off the bucket list in the Northeast?
Halibut.
All right.
Hooked them, haven't landed them. Halibut.
Oh,
I think that'd be the final.
the one you lost, was it early in the fight? What happened?
No, it was like mid fight. Like we got a glimpse of it, and then just died. It was on a Norwegian jig, so just a stupid treble opened up and pulled off. But I don't think it was a huge one.
It doesn't matter how you know.
It's a halibut.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, that's probably it for the Northeast. I think a surface sword. If we're gonna stay with the Northeast, halibut, surface sword. What else is there up here? That probably covers it.
Yeah.
We can get in some weird stuff like yellowtail flounder. Would be kind of cool. Just to eat them.
Yeah, a lot of my stuff, I have a lot hanging out there offshore that I need to do, but a lot of it's also conditional. Like I want a cod from the surf. I want to catch a cod from shore in the winter. That's on my. But you get to a certain
Go to
point.
Boston Harbor, Castle Island.
Plum Island.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, you're coming.
I'll be there. Yeah, halibut's pretty high up there for me. Sword's still. I still gotta get that done.
Swordfish.
I
are
need
cool.
a swordfish.
I really need one bad.
It's cool when you get them in the daytime because they're so beautiful and purple.
Yeah.
But then there's also some, electric reel. It's effective, but it's also mechanical.
Yeah.
There's something about getting them at night
I want to catch one at night
on
first.
a conventional reel.
There's a romance to the night fishing of it. Like he and I went out. We day dropped for them. Then we were with Captain Larry Backman, fished all night.
Ended a 17-trip successful
Yeah, he
sword
caught a
streak on his
swordfish
boat.
on like a million
We killed that.
trips in a row, and we didn't we didn't sniff one.
So you guys just kill bites.
Killed it.
Oh yeah,
No, that was a one-time thing. So invite us fishing. We'll
I'd have
crush
killed
it.
a lot of bites. But just being out there, you're the only one on deck. You're watching all the glow. Like that's how I'd like it. If I could dial it up, that's how I want it to happen. Just sitting out there, you're just you under the. It's
I like a big fatigue.
Yeah.
I get like a real tide runner. I've never caught any. I got some like decent ones, but a real like 80s like 10, 15 pound tide runner squeak. would be really cool.
They've been pretty scarce the last couple. The big ones, we're seeing more, but
It
seems
seems
to be on an upward trend. I think.
Yeah, from what it was, I remember as a young kid, I'd see people, my uncles and cousins in Quistit Harbor used to get them from the shore. They'd catch them, they'd be in there with bass and blues eating on the pogies, and you get them underneath. And then it seemed like it went really, especially up here. Rhode Island, a little bit west, and you get down into New York and stuff. The Peconic Bay, they see a lot of them, but up here it seems to be a bit of like a ghost, a unicorn that's a bycatch.
There's been an improving fall run for them in September in Buzzards Bay, where the boats get on them, and you can mark them. And I caught 2 from striper fishing this year in Buzzards Bay from shore. I ended up catching 2 a couple weeks apart, and they were nights when the striper fishing was brutal. Like I wasn't catching anything, but there were fish popping everywhere. And
Hoagie seems to have them patterned a bit.
yeah, he had a good day a couple years ago in October where he vertical jigged a bunch of them.
Yeah. The sea bass guys seem to get a bunch of them on the wrecks. Even in the springtime, they get the smaller ones. And then in the falls, it seems like some of the, even like the Tautog guys sometimes get them as a bycatch.
Yep. That I remember in Narragansett Bay last year, was it Brian Coombs came? He was like, saw some fish
Messing
under
them.
birds, thought they were going to be schoolies, and they were all like 8-pound weak fish. So that's a fishery that definitely seems to be coming back a little bit. You know, we're seeing
Now,
more.
again, does that fall into, we talk about cycles. Everything is
Yeah.
cyclical with species as it relates to oceanographic, phenomena. Are we just, is there something going on that's bringing them back in? Because there was a period of time where big eye, we've had some great prolific big eye years called really kind of the last decade. But for a while, it was, you really had to know what you were doing to get a shot at one a trip. Now it's, they've been thick as thieves. You didn't have to really do a whole lot other than be in the right area, which I guess it's all fishing at its core. But where are the longfin albacore? We haven't seen penguin numbers in a long, long time. And you used to be able to correlate, if you found the penguins, you found big eyes.
Yeah.
So, man, my only big eye I caught was on a headboat trip where it was everyone was catching longfin albacore, nothing else.
On a
and then all
bass
of a
hook.
sudden, they were hitting. I caught a couple longfin, and then they got real picky. They only wanted smaller baits, so I put on a small hook, small bait, and ended up hooking a big eye tuna that somehow landed on the big Jamaica. But it's been a few years since I've had.
I haven't seen any big numbers, and it used to be, it was a great charter fish, or even a fun fish trip. You go out, you make your few passes, you get covered up in the albacore, and then you try to get away from them because you've got 12 like that.
Yeah, let's find the yellowfin.
Correct. You just worked and checked off your species. That's how we used to run a lot of our charters. We'd start in, we'd never run straight to the edge. Even now, we always put in on the bank, on the flats. And we'd pick away at, get some dolphins just to get the blood flowing for people. Usually see whites, and then we get the albacores.
Yeah.
Maybe a yellowfin up on the bank, and then be like, all right, it's about 3:30, 4 o'clock. Let's go on down to the edge for the witching hour. But now you find lots of yellowfins on the flats. You just don't find the albacore, even in the colder water that they tend to prefer.
Now I wonder if will that be, you think they'll eventually shift back? Will that be an instantaneous? Will it just be like next year? There's a bunch of albacore. Will it trickle in? We're seeing a little more and a little more.
I don't know where they migrate to when they're not here. So are they getting overexploited in another international fishery? And then I don't know if they cross the Atlantic or if they're in open ocean getting whacked, because it's hard to say.
Jimmy, we're going to start the Penguin Project, you and I. Let's do it.
I love the trips. Like I would go on headboat trips to Hudson Canyon every fall. Religiously, I would do an October one there. I haven't done it in a couple years. And you'd get a mix. You'd get your yellowfin, you'd get your longfin, and they would both be, which one did you have?
Yeah.
And
Usually a
those
lot
were
of yellowfin at night, and when you start getting near gray light, the longfin start pushing through. And again, they're fun too. I think they're a beautiful fish. When I was a mate on a boat called Carinelli years back during the old Hyannis Blue Water tournament, we got a 65-pound penguin.
Wow.
It was bigger than some of our yellowfins.
Wow.
And but they're such a cool looking fish, and they're delicious.
very cool.
Talk about
I like 'em.
for canning.
Yeah. Like confit, best. The best tune you can use.
They look compressed. Like they've got that really stout body that then it seems to go abruptly to the tail.
And then I mean, when they get big a bit and they put those fins out, they can, if you get them on a nice like 25 class rod or a 30 class rod, they dig, and they're just fun when you do hit a pile of them, because more so than even yellowfin, every rod goes off. Especially if you had feathers, you just tell people to start jigging the rods if you're just pulling like feathers.
Yeah.
And they'll get piled on.
So I want to. We're now in bonus land. We're jumping around a little bit.
I was gonna say start talking about
No,
go ahead.
No.
Go,
Like I love bonus land, but like, how common is it when like you have a very set program and you've given us glimpses into, when you're going out to the edge and stuff. But like, if you wanted nothing but jig and pop, right, and you're out in the canyons, is it there? If you know what to look for almost every time out, that there's life there, or is it a special, gift from the offshore gods that say, here's a topwater bite and a jig bite?
I don't have a lot of experience personally doing any real jig and pop in the canyon, so I'm really not one to speak on that. That said, I believe it is always there. If the ingredients are there for trolling, it's probably there for jig and pop. There's plenty of times, we find the tuna's foaming on top.
Yeah.
I think if all the ingredients are there, it's possible. I'm really probably not one to speak on it as much, because we don't.
You don't do it.
We don't do it. I don't do it. I mean, we carry some spinning rods, and it's usually because we got a pile of fish up top. And I'll hand a couple spinning rods down to the cockpit because all the trolling rods went down. It's like, keep casting. They're right there. Let's see how many we can hook.
That's awesome.
It'd be a bold move. Like I've thought about that. Like, is it worth it if you leave all the trolling gear at the dock and go out there with just spinning tackle? Or would you be better off just setting that fuel bill on fire and staying home?
I think you're crazy to leave the trolling gear at home. That's, use that to find the body of fish. And then, once you start marking them, start jigging on them. And if you got them jigging,
once the pressure is off.
This is just my brain spinning now.
No, for sure.
If you're jigging on them and you're getting bites, and say if you got metered line, you're 50 foot down. If they're 50 feet down, they're going to come up and eat a popper.
I've had captains say that if you can get a fish up in the spread to eat, they're on the troll, then you can catch them on a popper.
We'll circle back to billfish. If we mark them on the down sounder at in 150 foot inside, or we'll say inside 100 feet, I'll immediately look backwards and figure that billfish is going to show up in the spread.
Wow.
Tunas
come that high? Don't come that far?
I mean, I think they'll come up even deeper. But the tunas for sure. I mean, if the tunas are inside 200 feet, I'm pretty confident that if not in the first pass that we marked them, the second pass will probably get them to come up. But if anything's inside 100 feet, that'll come up and eat. They can easily see that far up, especially if you're in clean water.
You guys run sonar on the boat?
Mm-hmm.
Is that just like a wild?
It's another tool.
Deal.
It's another tool, and it's only as good as your knowledge in it.
Mm-hmm.
I feel I'm pretty effective with it, but I'm by no means a master of it. There's other guys that are just wizards with it. But it's another tool that's definitely, when dialed in properly and you got a feel for it, can definitely give you a bit of a competitive advantage by knowing, whether to zig or zag. You're not guessing, especially with tunas. When you're in the canyons, bluefin, it's a little different, but we've had some success with it. But if you're offshore, and you're hunting individual billfish or big schools of tunas, it's definitely it's advantageous.
Giant fishing like on the inshore grounds, and it has its place there too.
Yeah, it's a little bit more difficult to tune. Ours, we use a Simrad Consberg one, and it does quite well in shallower water. I know the Furunos, I believe, are a little bit more difficult, but they still work.
Yeah.
It's just you have to know what you're looking at, because you're going to get a lot of different targets. You're going to hit whales, porpoises. You'll find bait with them in the canyons. I mean, I can't tell you how many times I know Robbie on Scup Slayer, Tyler on Persistence, and anybody that's out fish the canyons with will tell you that sometimes we will chase manta rays for a long time, not knowing that they're a manta ray.
Oh.
And it's just your sonar will light up. You're like, oh, it's on like Donkey Kong, and
Nothing happens.
no, you're chasing Batman pretty much.
You guys do a lot of tournaments. Are there?
We used to. We don't fish a lot anymore.
Oh,
Well, we still do some.
are there? I don't wanna call them
Regulations?
regulations, but are they going to do separate categories for that? Do they separate out?
Some, I think a lot of tournament, it seems to be the trend is that they're creating non-sonar categories, like Calcutta categories. To a certain degree, to me, it's just because a boat has one doesn't mean they're going to win a tournament or every single time. You still need experience, know-how with the equipment, good anglers, and of course, there's always a little bit of lady luck involved.
Yeah.
Now, is it a competitive advantage? Absolutely. But you're seeing more and more boats getting it. The costs of them are only going to come down. They're going to become more compact units. And I mean, you see them in Freeman's 46 Valhallas now. I mean, it's...
Oh, I didn't know that. I didn't know they'd come back down to get them in center consoles too. Wow.
Oh yeah, depends on which product you're using. Some are more compact units in terms of their power supply boxes, their amount of cables. Others are still pretty heavy, robust, and almost commercial inside. But I don't think it's. You still have to be a fisherman at your heart, at your core. Now, there's probably some that are really, really good with video games and are going to have a really good learning curve and become really effective with it. But if you don't have the network or experience or know-how or time leading up to an event on knowing where to go, sonar doesn't work if you don't have the fish to look at.
Yeah, it's true.
You make the argument for when side scan
You still got to get them to eat. You still got to land them. There's a lot that can go wrong from start to finish, and it all starts with being in the right place with this fish.
I see a lot of boats that are really good programs with no sonars, and they still mop up on the sonar boats. So to not fish a tournament because you think you're at a disadvantage, it's either fish it with where the rules are or don't.
Have you played with live sonar any yet?
No,
But
that was like freshwater stuff.
No,
That's like the forward-facing live
no,
scan stuff.
I think Garmin has a transducer that will
Hummingbird
do like
does it too,
1,500
right? feet
down.
I've seen that. It's similar.
I haven't seen it. Like I haven't looked
On
at
our
it.
Valhalla, we have we have Simrad, and it's like a 3D 360 surround scan. I play with it a little bit.
Yeah.
Not a whole lot. I mean,
I
I use the side scan more so on that boat than I do with the 360 stuff.
It'd be cool watching different species react to baits, like a sword coming up to a squid at night.
You can mark
or something
swordfish
like
with the
that,
sonar
on
the bottom,
Yeah.
which is pretty cool.
Yeah, that is cool.
And we can look, 6,000 feet out, 6,000 feet down.
That's a pretty good swath. I don't think I think even I'd have success with that kind of those eyes.
But there's a lot of tuning involved.
Yeah.
It's we can use it for looking for fish on the surface, but at the same time, it's even if whether we're looking for fish on the surface or trolling for fish, like in Costa Rica, I remember you could stay glued to it and you're like, all right, we got to cut a target, but then you pick up and use your eyes, the old-fashioned sonar. It's like, oh, there's 2 sailfish cutting right there. Forget those ones. There we go.
Yeah.
Kind of like it's like, all right, cool, we have a target. They're in the shipping lanes. It looks like there's something on the surface. It's 1,200 feet out, and you're staring at there, but then you might there's some tunas popping 100 yards to your port, but you're so focused on the screen, you're forgetting about your visuals. Yeah. There's a combination of everything.
To it all.
Yeah, a balance.
Is there anything on the horizon tech-wise that you're super excited to play with? I mean, I haven't. I'm just curious if there's anything on your radar.
Just curious to see how sonars and sounders.
Yeah.
There's a lot of technology in the research and commercial world in terms of transducers, different types of fish finding stuff.
Mm-hmm.
And I think, if you have the means or the platforms, you can implement that in the recreational side, which will definitely assist with things. I think what you're going to see is the sonar stuff continue to get more compacted as the recreational market continues to boom with it. And eventually, much like Seakeepers, you'll start to see every boat's going to have a sonar. Or, if, it's becoming harder to sell boats now that don't have them, just like with Seakeepers.
Yeah.
So I think there's always a constant evolution of technology.
Comes in waves.
Who knows? Maybe it's AI next that'll tell you exactly how far away, how big the fish is, whether it's a male or female, and if it's going to eat on your left side or your right side.
I don't want it to be that easy.
No.
That kind of sucks, but it just, to me, it's always kind of come in waves, and it seems like we're on kind of that, that boom.
I think it could be underwater visuals, audio visual, live, real-time live video feeds of a spread trolling. I mean, there's a couple startup companies out there that are dealing with stuff with like fiber optic fishing line and whatnot.
Yep.
That are utilizing AI as well with cameras underneath. I think that's likely the next thing we'll see. Now, whether it becomes a fad and it's truly applicable to all areas of fishing.
Yeah, I mean, some of that seems a little crude now, like the technology, but it'll improve. It'll become more streamlined, and it will make sense. I mean, some of my favorite videos on social media are just the ones that are right on the dredges, watching the fish come up and interact with them. So you get the right kind of fiber optics. You said you got that right on a screen in the
a lot of 360 sonar's been in the fishing world since probably the 80s, maybe late 70s. It's just been on a larger scale commercial side of things. So there's a lot of stuff. It's technology's there. It's just when it gets to a recreational market. No different than night vision and FLIR on the boats.
Yeah.
That's been in law enforcement, military for God knows how long, and then eventually it made its way to recreational markets because it got downsized, price pointed correctly. So a lot of stuff I think is there. It's just when it gets formatted for fishing.
Yeah.
Or recreational fishing.
John, so you're heading south end of this week. When does the whole operation move back north in the springtime?
June.
June, okay.
Yeah, sometime in June. We'll get back up here with the boats.
In the meantime, between now and then, what are you most excited? What part of the winter program are you most excited for right now?
Just sail fishing, South Florida. We'll do some nighttime tarpon fishing too. In Miami, there's a killer urban fishery for tarpon. If you haven't done it, I highly recommend it. It's really spectacular.
What time of year is that?
It's going to start like now through probably into April.
Okay.
It's you want to experience some of the coolest tarpon fishing under the skyline of Miami. You got to come down, and you can have nights you will get worn out and drenched in sweat fighting these things.
February boat show, Miami.
I'll connect you with my buddy Russ, the tarponator, and he will, or my buddy Wiley. There's a couple guys I can connect you guys with.
What's Russ' last name?
Kleppinger.
Okay.
And then Wiley Berg. Wiley fishes with us a little bit when we need a help.
It's always hard to find night fishermen.
Yeah. Oh, these are all night guys.
Yeah, it blows me away. Like I'll be down and like he's like, I got a trip that day. And I'm like, dude, like to friends. I'm like, well, let's fish at night. No.
Russ is.
Come on.
That's his bread and butter through the winter shrimp run for tarpon. He's only running trips at night. I didn't think he does 2 trips a night, and you'll have and boat show's a good time.
Yeah.
So I tried to when I went to the Keys. I was going on the Yankee Caps to go fish Pulley Ridge on the Gulf of Mexico, but I was driving down there because I had to bring a cooler with all the fish back. So I booked a tarpon trip, and I looked everywhere for somebody to take me at night. I didn't want to do the whole bridge thing with all the boats lined up, at Bahia Honda, which is what I ended up doing. But I could not find a captain who's, are any running night trips like we do, afternoons and mornings? And probably I was tight on time of finding somebody, but to know, I would rather do it. They seem so much more willing to.
They're a very nocturnal fish. Yeah. I mean, I don't know a whole lot about them. My experience is very limited. And prehistoric herring on steroids.
Yeah.
But it's fun. It's just my experience is really just Miami, because we're based there and Russ is based there. That's who we usually fish with, if we don't go out in our Valhalla. But it's urban fishing, like you're in Boston Harbor catching big stripers. You're looking at this skyline and
very cool.
You know, the neon lights of Miami, the Magic City, and you're catching 150-pound tarpon.
They're
That's
a lot
awesome.
easier to catch at night too.
And he can do fly if you want to do fly. Well, both the guys, Russ and Wiley, and there's
cool.
some others too. They'll do fly. They'll do shrimp. It's wild. I mean, sometimes if they're on the shrimp hard, like you hear them popping and see them all around you.
So the only real night trip I did, not counting like, pulling off the road and going and fishing around, the boat show and stuff with Chris usually, which we've had luck with. I mean, at night's the right time to go. But I did a Keys trip and I went at night and it was an overnight and it was, dude, the crabs were just flowing under the bridge like crazy. It literally sounded like somebody was up in a stealth bomber just dropping gallon.
If the shrimp are running hard too, bring a net because you'll get a whole bunch of like U8s.
We were.
You can bring a pack of
You can eat them.
with them.
That's awesome.
Oh yeah.
You do. We were dip netting crabs off the
the blue crabs.
off the engine cowling. I mean, off the engine shaft. And he was like, "Dude, that's $10. Throw it in the bucket." You know,
they're like little blue crabs about that big.
Exactly. And I think probably hooked 12 of them. It was insane. It was awesome. But like you said, they were just explosions everywhere in the darkness. There was no moon.
We've seen them off the beach pushing on ballyhoo.
Yeah.
And like in the moonlight, just ballyhoo sprays and it's tarpon blowing up on them right off the beach. Right there. You're listening to the nightclubs on South Beach and tarpon are doing their thing too. Totally
So
worth it. You can
cool,
do sailfishing during the day and hit tarpon at night.
That's a good winter ahead, man. That's
Yeah. And then, we'll come May, we'll get into some blackfins in the springtime. We'll get a nice mixed bag off Miami. We don't, we fish some banker's hours, very relaxed again, just bending rods. Some days it's a lot of blackfins, other days it's a lot of sails. Some days the down rod's going off and who knows what's coming up off a wreck.
Very
that's
cool.
awesome.
Some of the beauty of South Florida, we're 5 miles out.
To do the winters there and then the summers up here in New England, man. That's kind of the dream.
It's worked out for the last 20 years, being down south in the winter and summers up here. It's been a real blessing to be able to, even when I was with Blondie, we were based in Montauk, which was a really cool place to fish out of, inshore and offshore. Just the Northeast, but be able to always, come back home to the Northeast waters every summer, and that's been a real blessing that I've had in my career so far. And then the wintertime being able to go, there's some pretty cool places and experiences and people.
John, well, thanks so much for coming in, man.
Thanks for having me.
Dude, that was
Pleasure.
fun.
It was awesome.
Appreciate it.
Absolutely.
Let's get that tide runner next spring, dude. We got some downtime.
Yeah, you got it, Skilly King.
Dude,